Shalom Aleichem, welcome. I'm Lisa Newman, the Yiddish Book Center's Director of Publishing and Public Programs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, Hand in Hand, with Ellen Cassedy and Anita Norich. This evening's program is pre-recorded due to scheduling issues for our translators, Ellen and Anita. We will not be including a live Q&A following this program. However, we invite you to submit your questions as you usually do in the lower right-hand side of your computer screen. We will collect those, and then we will be announcing a future podcast in which Ellen and Anita will answer those questions. So don't refrain from sending them. Anita Norich is the Tikva Freimer-Kensky Collegiate Professor Emerita of English and Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan, the translator of Desires by Celia Dropkin, Fear and Other Stories by Hannah Blattstein, A Jewish Refugee in New York by Kadra Molodovsky, and numerous short stories, among them 20 previously untranslated stories by Israel Joshua Singer, in the 3-volume collected works of I.J. Singer, published by Koren Press. She's the author of Writing in Tongues, Yiddish Translation in the 20th Century, Discovering Exile, Yiddish and Jewish American Literature in America During the Holocaust, and the Homeless Imagination in the Fiction of Israel Josiah Singer. Sorry, everybody. Israel Joshua Singer. Ellen Cassedy is a translator, a Yiddish translator, with a special interest in women writers. Her translations include On the Landing, stories by Yenta Mash, and Oedipus in Brooklyn and Other Stories by Bluma Lempel, with co-translator Yirmiyahu Aaron Taub. She's the author of We Are Here, Memories of the Lithuanian Holocaust, and Working 9 to 5, A Woman's Movement, a Labor Union, and the iconic movie. Her awards include the Grub Street National Book Prize for Nonfiction and the Leviant Memorial from the Modern Language Association. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And great to have you here. You are both extremely busy, so thank you for hopping on for this evening's program and for the future podcast in which you will answer all the ensuing questions that come up. So I'm obviously eager to speak with you about your work co-translating the autobiographical novel that was just released, Hand in Hand, by Rashel Veprinski. My first question to you both, and I'm just jump in, is what drew you each to the work and to collaborating on the translation?
Anita, why don't you start?
I was about to say the same thing. So as some of you know, I've spent a long time looking for novels by women who were said not to have written novels. I'm tired of saying this. It's patently ridiculous. And I came across this novel, which was first published in 1971, although it describes a period from 1918. And it's about, it's a love story and a complicated one, but it's really about the Yiddish poetry group called the Junge, the youth, who have always been very dear to my heart. And I was just fascinated by a roman à clef, a novel with a key to these characters. And I had never co-translated, but I've always admired Ellen's translations. I thought they were wonderful. And I thought I would try the not in splendid isolation mode of translation. And we worked together on it. But I'm sure Ellen has more to add.
Yeah, so I had encountered Hand in Hand, which is called Das Kreuzen von die Hand in Yiddish by Rashel Veprinski, in my Yiddish reading circle, which now meets on Zoom every other week. And we read only work by women writers. And the group has been going on for well over 10 years. There's a lot of literature out there in Yiddish by women. And so I had recently read this novel, and so had been very intrigued by it. It's a hot romance. And when Anita asked me if I would collaborate with her on translating it, I was very eager to do so. I had already worked together with a co-translator, Yirmiyahu Aaron Taub, on our translation of Bluma Lempel's work. And that was just a fantastic experience, very profound. He brought to the table his own background, having grown up in an ultra-Orthodox family, and I brought to the table my background, which is I am a native English speaker par excellence. And in my family growing up, we could not get through a meal without discussing some very important issues of English language usage, and I'm a total stickler. So when Anita brought me, we decided we were going to translate. I would do one chapter, and then she'd do a chapter, and then I'd do a chapter, she'd do a chapter. In fact, I did a chapter, and then she started with chapter 2 and did the entire rest of the book and sent it back to me. And I thought, wow, this is really good. And then I got out the equivalent of my blue pencil and I made, hundreds and hundreds of suggested changes. Then we got together and we had these wonderful, hysterical sessions together in Anita's kitchen, where we went over every single word. And, it's a process of not only going through every single word very carefully, and getting really deep into the verbs and the adjectives and so on, but also really deeply inhabiting this story of this young woman, Rashel, and her lover, Mani Leib, and she was 25, he was 35, he had 5 children. She had one daughter who was 7 years old. They left their families and they started this extremely stormy romance that we read about with great interest. It's a real page turner, and you see them just getting deep into each other's psyches. And Mani Leib is who was one of the best known of Die Junge poets. He's obsessed with her. And she's sort of the more down-to-earth person, but it's also a matter of, there's a lot of angst there. That, he loves me not, she loves me not. And you get deep into this, to their mindset about each other and about themselves and about what is the cost of this romance for them? What do they gain? What do they lose from it? How do people in their circle respond? And it's absolutely fascinating.
Kirkus Review describes the book as an emotionally intense tale enlivened by a unique literary history. I wonder, maybe, Anita, if you could speak a little bit about that history. And I know for many of the Yiddishists out there, they know the who's who. And then there are those of us outside that inner circle who may not know who they are.
Well, Ellen has, introduced you to some of the names that are being represented here. Mani Leib was one of the major Yiddish American poets of all time, and certainly of the Junge. There are other of that group. Let me say a word about the Junge, which, as you said, most of your listeners will already know. The Junge posited themselves correctly, I would say, as the opposite of, or the answer to, what were known as the sweatshop poets. They claimed to be beholden only to the self and the emotions of the self, rather than to the social needs of the Yiddish speaking community in America. One of them, a writer named Zisha Landau, has the all-time best line about Yiddish poetry in America, which I quote, whenever I can, which is, he said that unlike the sweatshop poets, he characterized the sweatshop poets as, and I quote, the rhyme department of the Jewish labor movement, which, was kind of not true, but okay. And the Junge really were modernist poets whose influences were from European and American modernist poetry. And they wrote a kind of poetry that was eye-opening for those of us who came to it after the fact. And Rashel Veprinski, who, as Ellen said, was Mani Laib's lover for some 35 years. This was a serious relationship. This was not a one-off deal. Was also a poet, also part of that group, as was Anna Margolin, Rosa Lebensboim, who wrote under the name Lebensboim, and others who were at the forefront.
The book is really kind of an illustration of Die Junge because it's so obsessively personal and intimate. And the two of them, the two lovers, just like probe each other's psyches and get so involved with each other. And in the book, there are letters that the Mani Laib character writes to the Rashel Veprinski character, verbatim actual letters that he actually did write. And they are just off the wall, you know. They're so full of emotion and feeling and madness. And it's really, I feel like the book, it is very poetic in many ways, that it really does draw you into just the depths and the profundity of a really intense romance. It's you know, as I said, it's a page turner, and you get involved with these characters, but you also feel like, oh, this is what Die Junge were really about.
I think that's interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Please.
Um, you have both translated the work of other women writers, and the decades are different. Certainly Bluma Lempel, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but Bluma Lempel and Jente Maas fall towards the end of the 20th century, and even into the 21st a little bit with Jente Maas. And Molodowsky, Veprinski, and Blankstein, sorry, all earlier. And I'm wondering what you find in this character and how you put Veprinski in there in terms of what's revealed in the book and the kinds of things that she wrestles with.
We wrote this into the forward, which I think we meant as the after, whatever. Although it takes place it's situated in around 1918, it reads like it's now, or now reads like then. And I think that was one of the attractions of this, 1918, 1971, 1900, 2025, emotions aren't that radically different in these periods. The complications of affairs or of love or children are not that radically different in different eras. Of course, the context is different. I mean, the historical context, the political context. But I was very drawn to the timelessness of much of this story, while at the same time so deliberately located in a particular time among particular characters. Just to follow up on something that Ellen mentioned, I found, I'm not sure we agree about this, but I found a lot of this to be way over the top. The expressions of desire and the quest for the other, and the love, no, I can't live without you. I don't know how to go on. Where are you? Why aren't you taking care of me? Basically, is what Mani Laib writes over and over. It was a little over the top, but then it was actually what Mani Laib had written.
Right.
So here's this poet who is of a group that says, I am not the rhyme department of any socialist movement. And then here is this poet who really is a modernist, brilliant poet, who's, writing these kinds of really, I mean, high school level, but it showed something about the deeply emotional state of all of these characters. I mean, they fight with one another, they live with one another, they sleep with one another, they stop sleeping with one another. it's, I don't want to say it's mythic in the sense of timeless, but it is sort of timeless nonetheless.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that you feel as if you're there, and the book is written, even though it was written decades after these events, it's very precise. It's very, you are there, you're in the room, you're, in the bed, you're in the countryside. They go to the Catskills for the summer,
Qualify that a
and
little bit.
wonderful, lush descriptions of the mountains and the grass, and it's wonderful. And she sort of very artfully, I think, brings in the social context of these poets who are in these smoke-filled rooms and fighting with each other and competing with each other and so on. And then you're transported into this love affair, and it reads very easily. Even though it takes place decades ago, it's not an antique kind of thing. And you're right, it's we could write these same things today.
And we could see them as equally over the top.
Yes.
Uh, um, I guess I have to ask, she reveals a lot in this book, over the top or not over the top, whatever. Who knows if it's, revenge social media posting or not. What do you think she got out of that? Or, I mean, and I don't want to have any spoiler alerts because I think you want to read through the whole book, folks out there. Trust me. Um, but what do you think she was looking to reveal or not to reveal in this writing?
Well, I think what she says over and over again in the book that she was looking to kind of live her full life, be her full self. She had been in a kind of a loveless marriage. She'd been married off to someone as a teenager, someone she never really loved, and she was looking to really live life to the fullest. And Mani Labe had a very positive outlook on life, and he promised her, "Come with me, and we will find the beauty in the world." And remember, these are people who spent their lives working in sweatshops and factories. Mani Labe was a bootmaker by day and a poet by night, but he was able to emerge from that small, clattering, noisy room and come outside and just feel the magic of New York City and the thrill of being with other writers. And he loved the countryside, and he really brought her along with him in that, and made her feel that, wow, life is full of beauty and it's full of meaning. And she really communicates that in the book.
That's something else that, again, people who know Yiddish literature in America know these brilliant modernist poets were house painters and shoemakers. They worked, they labored, not happily. I mean, out of necessity, right? He resents what a great shoemaker he is, the Mani Labe character. But that sort of humanizing both the worker and the poet is also something that drew me to this. To answer your question about what does she get out of it, why did she do it, I think she's really writing a love letter to Mani Labe, who has been dead for a while by the time she writes this, but it's, as we keep saying, it's based on his letters, on their actual encounters. So I think it really is an encomium to Mani Labe. And at the same time, she puts herself at the center of the story of this group, where they are not usually put. Some of it is, to those of us who care about this group, some of it is actually, I mean, embarrassing. What she says about Anna Margolin is just, you have to forgive her for it when you read it. But it also shows some of the dynamics of that group. But she's younger than Mani Labe. She loves his poetry. The first time she meets him, she can already recite his poetry by heart. But she's not a wilting lily in this story.
Which makes me want to ask you the question, And I'm not sure if you know the answer, but what do you think her contemporaries who are part of this inner circle felt about this? Didn't those relationships, did they carry through to the end of her life?
Look, these people, to the surprise of many, but not to us, I hope, they argued, they fought, they slept with one another, they broke up with one another. Um, they were both part of a cohesive literary circle and at odds with one another within that cohesive literary circle. The dynamics, I think, are very human, and as I said, sometimes difficult to take, um, in the criticism of one another, in the way that they diss one another. Um, and Mani Laib, and this is historically true, had many lovers before Rashel Veprinski, and we hope not after. But um, she's not shy about saying that, and she's not shy about saying or thinking or letting us know that she's worried about being one in a string. But the passion is too great, and the love is too great, and as it turns out, she outlasts them all. Not by chronology, but by, I mean, not by her age, but by this relationship.
I almost wondered when I read it if this is sort of a purging for her of an inner dialogue, and wrestling with what this relationship was all about.
Perhaps.
I think so. And I think that, she must have, there's something very rewarding, I think, about her going back and revisiting. And at the point where she was publishing this book, she had collected his letters and his poetry and had published it. And she really had dedicated herself after his death in 1953 to preserving his memory and making sure that that he was recognized. And he actually had a lot of recognition after his death, and toward the end of his life as well. But here she puts herself in there, and she makes clear her own love for him. And he got a lot of acclaim, but here is a very intimate portrait of him. And I think it must have been very, very deep and very rewarding for her to do that, and to bring their love for each other to life on the page.
My next question is to ask you, you talked a little bit about the collaboration already, but maybe what you're working on currently?
Um, I I can't quite. I never wanted. I always wanted do different, to translate different authors each time, because there's so much out there that's underrepresented. And my first book, as you mentioned, was a translation of a Kaja Molodovsky novel. And then I couldn't quite let it go. There's another Kaja Molodovsky novel, which has only been serialized and it really barely mentioned anywhere except in bibliographies. A novel that she published serially in 1948, which in Yiddish is called what I will not call it in English. It's called Zayde Zoneiniglich, and it's really about legacy, about yichus, about inheritance. And I'm translating that one and enjoying it very much.
Ellen?
And I went back to an author I'd previously translated, Bluma Lempel, and a co-translator, Yirmiyahu Aaron Taub, and the two of us are translating a correspondence between Bluma Lempel and Chava Rosenfarb, another Yiddish writer who was living in Montreal. In 1982, Chava Rosenfarb, out of the blue, wrote to Bluma Lempel and said, "I've been reading you in the Yiddish literary journals, and I feel that we should get to know each other. I feel very close to you. Who are you?" And they started a correspondence that was very loving and very important to the two of them, that lasted throughout the 1980s. And so Yirmiyahu and I are translating those letters, and it's a lovely correspondence. And I'm hoping that once we're finished with the translation, I'm going to turn that correspondence into a two-woman play, because the minute I looked at it, I thought, oh, I can just see this. I can see how the lighting will work and how first one writes to the other and the other receives and so on. And it's a wonderful interplay between these two important Yiddish women writers.
And anything else you would like to add in terms of what you hope the reader will take away from the book?
Well, I think that it's important to think about what it means to exhume this work, this neglected work these works by Yiddish women writers that have just sort of been sitting there untranslated, unavailable to the mostly non-Yiddish reading world. And now, thanks in large part to the Yiddish Book Center, a whole, like dozens of translators are working on works by women and men. And we're seeing aspects of Jewish history, of women's history, of people's history that we just didn't have access to before. And it's really a treasure. And I think we have to thank the founder of the Yiddish Book Center, Aaron Lansky, and we have to thank Irena Klepfish, who did so much, has done so much to bring this work out into the open. And we have to thank all of us who are part of this movement to bring to light this important work and honor it and learn from it and make up for the fact that women were not given their rightful place in the literary canon up to this point. And now they're getting that. And I think that a lot of these women, I know certainly in this correspondence between Bluma Lempel and Chava Rosenfarb, they're mourning, they're lamenting the fact that their readership is dying off. And they really, really want it to be read in English. Chava Rosenfarb translated her own work into English, and it was published during her lifetime. And Bluma waited mostly until, it was after she died, her work, Yirmiyahu and I brought it out in English. But I think it's so important to me, and it's so rewarding for me to add my link to the Die Goldene Kate, the golden chain of Yiddish literary work. So it really feels like a passion for me to do this translation work.
And like Ellen, I've become a little obsessed with getting these things out. And some of it comes from Peak. I came into Yiddish, into the Yiddish academic world, into the Yiddish literary world at a time when people mentioned maybe two poets, but not women prose writers, which has always been my passion. And I mean, this may sound a little too exalted somehow, but I really think that getting these works out changes not only Yiddish literary history, which it most certainly does. You cannot create a syllabus now. You cannot, speak authoritative. Well, I know people have done it, but you shouldn't speak authoritatively about Yiddish literature while ignoring these names, these people. So that's one motivation for me and one, satisfaction for me. And another is that I think it changes what we understand of the Jewish individuals' entry into the modern world. Men and women have different experiences. They experience the same historical things. There's war, there's economic upheaval, there's movement, exile, pogroms, opportunities. It's available to everybody, but it's available differently. And I think broadening that story is important.
Here, here. And I will say, in terms of bringing these works out in translation, wearing the white coat hat, press hat, it's literature, and it's literature that deserves to be
yes,
literary work that stands up to its contemporaries, and it still stands up today. Not all of it. No literature in one language is all fabulous and brilliant, but the works that you're bringing forward really do add to the conversation, the understanding, and stand on their own as really strong works of literature and great reads. So I thank you both for everything you're doing to bring this out, and I hope you're drinking lots of coffee and continuing to translate because we're ready to read more books.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Again, for everybody out there, Hand in Hand, an autobiographical novel translated by Ellen Cassedy and Anita Norich. White Go Press, 2025. It's just out. It is available wherever books are sold. If you are outside of the United States, it's available there too. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thanks to our producer, as always, Elizabeth Carteropoli, Dearden, and to all of you members and supporters out there who make our ongoing work possible. To learn more about how you can become a member or support our initiatives, visit yiddishbookcenter.org, and please check out our events calendar to see the full listing of upcoming events, virtual programs, in-person events, and talks taking place both at the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst and across cities all over the United States, Canada, and the UK. Until next time, be well, be happy, and tune in again soon. Thanks.